Okay, I can kind of see it. I hope you can read it probably pretty well. So I'm very happy to be here in Ottawa. Actually, it's my Canadian and Danyliw baptism. So thank you, Dominique, and thank you everyone for organizing and for letting me open the seminar. So I'll be speaking about providing water across enemy lines and how Voda Donbasu adapts to the warscape in eastern Ukraine. So if you remember the introduction of my paper describing the daily work of a water technician in Avdiivka near the front line in Donbas in Kiev-controlled territory, Olha's description of her daily work reflects the dynamics of persistence and change in war. And she tries to create some sort of normal work life within the chaotic and sometimes dangerous circumstances around her. So you don't see it very well here, but this is the shelter that was built on the location of Voda Donbasu's pumping station in Avdiivka. It used to be like just a place where they would keep some tools, and it was built out. If you go inside, there's a television set that doesn't really work, and a coffee machine and a bed and everything needed to spend up to 24 hours hidden away underground if there's some shelling. So as you read in the paper, Olha tries to adapt to the circumstances around her, and many employees of Voda Donbasu have had to adapt not only their daily lives but also to all these new work conditions marked by the separation line and danger. So the research I did presents a case study looking at how an infrastructure companies, professionals adapt their action to conflict, and it constitutes a preliminary attempt based on anthropological field work to understand the specificities of occupational and infrastructure dynamics in warscape. So this is a notion by Carolyn Nordstrom to describe the effect of violent conflict on social structures. So in this case, in the deindustrialized and populated warscapes of Donbas. So this means looking at how the war changed the way the company and the employees operated, how they kept the water flowing across enemy lines, and especially it takes into account the fact that within this company of 12,000 people, and that roughly 7,500 work on secessionist-controlled areas, and 5,000 in Kiev-controlled areas, and they have to interact with people that on each side is officially labeled as an enemy. So this is important because these collaborations are significant because they survived the outbreak of the war and have continued in some form or other throughout the war. Here you have the map quickly that you probably hardly see here, but you have the front line, and you can see how the facilities of Voda Donbasu actually dot the front line with a lot of facilities situated in the gray zone, so meaning the zone between the advanced positions of both armed forces and are constantly affected by by shelling. So here you have a bit of illustration. So basically, the research question is, how do the social and operational dynamics of infrastructure adapt to violent conflict? And so I'm sorry, I'm going back because my presentation got a bit mixed up. Basically, Voda Donbasu operates across the front line. So what is important is that it has 30 subdivisions on both sides, that the headquarters are in Donetsk. It's a Ukrainian company working according to Ukrainian legislation, but with management based in Donetsk. which means that it hasn't been nationalized by the authorities in Donetsk, unlike a lot of other originally Ukrainian-controlled companies. So the company is characterized by the stability, actually, of its staff, on the one hand, and also on the new mobility that was caused by the conflict. So in the paper, I detailed a lot the damages, the indirect and direct damages that Voda Donbasu's facilities have been subjected to. I'm not going to go into any details here about that because it would just be a lot of figures, but just to give you an idea, over half of the 16 filter stations have been shelled at some point or another. A lot of the pipelines that are inaccessible because they're in the gray zone are deteriorating and the maintenance can't be done as necessary. And just to give you an example again, in April last year, the Donetsk filter station was shut down for several days, cutting off about 350,000 people. All this because a bus carrying, while transporting employees that finished their shift at the Donetsk filter station back to their home in Yesunevata were targeted by shelling, and 5 employees were injured. So in these conditions, Voda Donbasu continues to work, more or less. So the conflict completely overturned the economic and management model of Voda Donbasu that originally worked as a municipal local company and suddenly has to work internationally, spreading out its contacts and interactions on a political level, at the Minsk Group, for instance, and also speaking to international donors. So it completely turned around the company. The methodology, sorry. I'm not going to go into any detail because I said in the beginning that it was an anthropological approach. And as for the conceptual framework, is that the, yeah, okay. I use interactionist sociology and anthropology of war. I look at how, as a result of war, the order that frames a person's life disappears or changes, and how people adapt to the sudden lack of familiar norms. And I take into account the context of repeated breakdowns that occurred within a lifetime in the specific context of Donbas. So leaning on sociologists Buravoy and Verderi, conceptualizations on the effect of the collapse of the Soviet or socialist order on social dynamics, I look at the world changes provoked by war and the new agency that it generates in people. So take an actor-based perspective. The paper looks at how the company's employees change or not their way of doing things together, as sociologist Howard Becker would say, as a reaction to the conflict. And so most importantly, it's looking at how people adapt to conflict-provoked system collapse by negotiating normality in a new way. So basically, what you see is that people try to live normal lives, whatever the conditions around them. And so this is what we'll be seeing. So what have I observed so far during my 2 field trips to the different Voda Donbasu facilities along the contact line? This is like very preliminary research. Okay, how to work normally in war. So the different strategies that Donbas employees adopted to continue working. So seeking normality through evasion strategies, which means sticking to old work routines. As you saw on the paper, Olha, who qualifies her job as being routine and sort of boring, even though when you read how she works under conditions of occasional shelling, it really is not. And also like the depoliticization of intra-company relations that is part of that. Also seeking normality through innovation. I can't really, is this right? Yeah, okay. So this means like adapting former practices to the warscape by inventing new ways of doing your work. So, for instance, the internationalization that I mentioned and the broadening scope of interactions, or the way there's like the SIM card dance with the managers of Voda Donbasu. 1 minute? Okay. Also looking at new work legitimacy by integrating conflict and risk as a mission through new safety procedures and no bonuses paid for dangerous work. So as a conclusion, the everyday work in war actually, what happened here? Here we go, sorry. Reframes occupational legitimacy and identity. So danger works as a professional process of legitimization, and the fact that they are now out there on a mission, working more like firefighters than as service providers in pre-war conditions, adds to legitimacy by dignifying in a way this new way of working and compensating to a certain extent the difficulties of conflict-related work. And it also serves as a way of rationalizing the fact that they remain in these localities very near the conflict line. Okay, so I'll just stop here, and I'm open to your questions and then to everyone else's questions. Thank you.